area of our lives, and that one word is needs. It drives commerce, it drives relationships, and it drives everything that we have to do in life. And so, even as we discuss this important topic, the emerging role of the teacher, it has to do with the emerging role of education. Let us invite God's presence to bless our deliberation and to guide our thoughts. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, you said and you demonstrated that even before we know our needs, you have known them and made provision for them. And so, Lord God, we dedicate this webinar, this time of dialogue, this time of discourse to you. We ask for your inspiration, we ask for your revelation, and we ask, Lord God, that you inspire all the speakers and all the listeners, that as we have this conversation, that you will point us to those needs that are emerging and reveal to us the various tasks and the roles that teachers are being called to. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much, Reverend Bosworth Mullins. Amen. And you stated, sir, that it is also the emerging role of education. Well stated, and we must punctuate that point. Allow me to welcome Dean Joy Baker Gibson. Welcome, Dean, who will give us the official welcome. What a time to be a dean at a university, and such an esteemed university as Michael University. I am a past student of Wolmer's Girls. I attended Wolmer's 4th-6th form, so I would pass Michael every day on my way to get the bus. Dean Joy Baker Gibson.
Thank you so much, Madam Moderator. I am extremely pleased to be here. Dr. Asburn Pinnock, President of the Michael University College, Dr. Albert Benjamin, Vice President of Academics, Mr. Rudolph Swell, Vice President of Administration, Dr. Karen Dunkley, Moderator, esteemed colleagues, distinguished guests, members of the Jamaican diaspora, students, good afternoon. It is with a great sense of joy and pride that I extend a hearty welcome to you as we come together again to participate in the 3rd session of the Michael University College Practicum Unit International webinar. Did I say international? Yes, indeed. We have at least 2 continents, North America and Asia, represented here this afternoon. Isn't that something spectacular? We thank God for the ease of communication and interaction that technology brings. The Michael family extends a cordial welcome to the members of the panel. Joining us today are Dr. Dwayne Dice, former chairman of the Education Task Force through the Jamaica Diaspora Task Force Action Network. Ms. Nadine A. Malloy, principal of Arden High School, and Dr. Miguel Barker, principal of ABA Oman International School, all the way in the Middle East. We welcome you to the Michael from a distance. Certainly, you will hear more about these members of the panel later on in the session. A special welcome is extended to our moderator, Dr. Karen Dunkley. Dr. Dunkley came from humble beginnings in Ensom City, Spanish Town. She is a proud graduate of St. Catherine High School and Wolmer's Girls, where she attended 6th form. Dr. Karen Dunkley wears many hats. She currently serves as the Jamaica Diaspora representative for Northeast USA. She's a veteran educator, a transformational leader, a social advocate, a mentor for teenage mothers, a former high school principal and deputy superintendent in the United States. Dr. Dunkley is ranked as one of the most successful educators in the United States and one of the most internationally recognized Jamaican-born educators. She has collaborated with Jamaican schools, individuals, and organizations to improve and support educational community development in the grassroots level in Jamaica. Indeed, this is a lady who has made indelible mark in educational sphere and in nation building. Welcome, Dr. Dunkley. We salute and congratulate the Practicum unit for conceptualizing this great and novel initiative. Today marks the third presentation in a series of 4 webinars. For those of you who have attended the first 2 sessions, can certainly agree with me that they were of high standards and were rich in quality. We anticipate the same for this panel discussion, or better yet, even a greater time of sharing. I believe that the theme, Global Reset, the emerging role of the teacher, is extremely relevant and appropriate in this chronological time. In fact, it is quite appropriate in these unprecedented times. The arrival of COVID-19 to our shores has left many sectors in turmoil, not only in our country, but the entire world. Undoubtedly, the education sector is one of the worst hit sectors. Despite the doom and gloom, I believe that there is still hope for us as a country. This theme, I believe, has embraced the popular saying that we must not waste a crisis. It is time for action. The time is ripe for global reset. The onslaught of the COVID-19 pandemic has given the education sector a head push. Today is a living testimony of one of the benefits of this pandemic. We are able to meet in this forum through the use of technology. Now, this is what we call a global reset. In recent times, we have seen where the role of the teacher is changing rapidly. Since the arrival of the virus, teachers had to quickly reimagine human connections and interactions to facilitate learning. This paradigm shift in the education sector calls for the teacher to be innovative and creative. The immediate shift from the brick and mortar space to that of a virtual space has significantly reshaped the day-to-day operations of the ordinary classroom teacher. Teachers can no longer rely on some of those antiquated pedagogies that they are accustomed to. New skill sets are now required in order for a teacher to function effectively and efficiently. If teachers are to remain relevant and effective, we must recalibrate and retool to meet the needs of our time. The students that we interact with now are of a different era and caliber. These digital natives will only function in the classroom if we facilitate learning through modern information technologies. The COVID-19 pandemic has set the groundwork for us, despite the challenges that confront us with the use of technology. The education landscape now and in the future will require teachers to be critical thinkers. They must be technologically competent in order to survive. Despite the overwhelming consequences of the pandemic, this global crisis has been an extraordinary time for teaching and learning. The world is learning how adaptable and resilient educational systems, policymakers, teachers, students, and families can be. The MICO, as the oldest teacher training institution in the Western Hemisphere, must continue to lead the way in training teachers who will be cutting-edge 21st century educators. As I close, I encourage all teachers, both pre and in service, to begin to reflect on the significant role that they need to play as we seek to build a better Jamaica. The place of choice to live, work, raise families, and do business. I leave with you the words of Nelson Mandela, and I quote, "Education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world." End of quote. Teachers, we are agents of change. Let's play our role. Dr. Dunkley, our moderator, I now turn over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Dean Baker Gibson. Ladies and gentlemen who have joined us via Zoom, if you're on YouTube or across your social media, please just give such a warm thumbs up, round of applause to Dean Gibson. Dean, that was a passionate welcome. Thank you. And I just wanted to highlight, you stated recalibrate and retool right now, that we cannot rely on the antiquated ways for this new generation. I mean, absolutely fantastic, a passionate welcome. And Dean, this was a call to action. So boy, I'm telling you, panelists, what a beginning, what an opening. At this time, I welcome Mrs. Danielle Blackwood and Miss Claudia Forbes, Mrs. Cordell Francis Ferguson, to read the profiles of our distinguished panelists. Thank you so very much.
Good afternoon, colleagues. One of our esteemed panelists this afternoon is an author, speaker, teacher, consultant, entrepreneur, and an educational leadership advisor. Dr. Dwayne Dice is committed to using his skills and education to support the educational community in Jamaica, the US, and around the world. He was born in Kingston, but he grew up in the hills of St. Anne with his twin brother on their grandparents' farm. Equipped with a strong faith in God and belief in the power of education, Dr. Dice began his educational journey, earning a B.Ed in education from the Catholic College of Mandeville. He received both a Master of Arts in Educational Leadership and a Master of Education in Teaching and Learning from St. Mary's University of Minnesota before earning his Doctorate of Education in Leadership and Management from St. Thomas University. He was recently accepted into the renowned Summer Principal Academy program at Columbia University Teachers College, where he will earn a New York State Building Leadership Certification and a Master of Education in Public School Building Leadership in 2022. Dr. Dice has over 15 years of professional experience teaching in classrooms and providing instructional training to teachers. At the onset of the pandemic, he conducted and facilitated over 25 virtual trainings attended by 20,000 teachers and administrators throughout the Jamaican diaspora on topics including online platforms, instructional strategies, early childhood, differentiated instruction, online assessment online assessment tools, as well as student and parent engagement. Dr. Dice is a published author who also hosts EduTalk and Virtual Storytime Weekly on Facebook Live. It is indeed a pleasure to have you serve on the panel this afternoon, Dr. Dwayne Dice.
Thank you so much, Ms. Danielle Blackwood. And now we invite Ms. Frances Ferguson to introduce her panelists.
Great afternoon to you, my colleagues, and to those who are listening on the YouTube channel. My name is Cordell Frances Ferguson, and I'm greatly honored to welcome Miss Nadine Malloy. Miss Nadine Malloy hails from Spring Hill in the parish of Portland. She is a two-time graduate of the University of the West Indies, Mona, and holds a graduate degree in secondary education administration. Ms. Malloy gained her teacher education from the Church Teachers College in Mandeville, Manchester. Her qualifications have afforded her to acquire both local and international experience, where she has worn many hats in the field of education, some of which include two-term president of the Jamaica Association of Principals of Secondary Schools and president of the Jamaica Teachers Association from 2010 to 2011, and presently principal of the Esteem Arden High School since 2012. Ms. Malloy is also a trained school inspector with the National Education Inspectorate. Consequently, the school has continued to experience significant growth and is now rated exceptionally high by the National Education Inspectorate for the first time since the inspections began in the new improved format. Ms. Malloy has gained numerous achievements and recognition and has offered her service in various capacities. She was named the LASCO MOE Principal of the Year 2009 to 2010. She was also responsible for returning to Jamaica the first full copy of the Marcus Garvey trial documents. A service and community-minded individual, Nadine Malloy has served and continues to serve on national boards. She has served on the Jamaica National Heritage Trust Board and Institute of Jamaica Council. She is currently a director of the Gleaner Media Company Limited, the Barbados-based CXC charity, and the Jamaica Publishing House Limited. She is currently a trustee of the JTA and is the first female from the Caribbean to be elected to serve on the Brussels-based Education International Executive Board for a 4-year term beginning July 2019. Her JTA presidency was marked by her strong advocacy for the improvement to the education system. And she strongly believes that the working condition of the teacher is the learning condition of the student. Both union and professional development activities work in tandem and must be viewed as inseparable. Mm-hmm. She believes that the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic will only serve to fuel more significant and needed changes in the education system. Welcome, Ms. Nadine Malloy.
Thank you so very much, Ms. Cordell Frances Ferguson, and welcome. Of course, we have such a panel of deep practitioners. So at this time, we welcome Ms. Claudia Forbes to introduce our third panelist, all the way from the Middle East, Panelist Barker. Welcome, Ms. Forbes, or Mrs. Forbes.
Ms. Forbes? That's it. Okay, greetings everyone. Dr. Megal Barker is the middle school principal at ABA, American British Academy, Oman International School, located in Muscat, Oman. He is a veteran educator with over 25 years of experience in the classroom and in school administration. Dr. Barker previously served at ABA as Middle Years Program Coordinator and Assistant Principal for 7 years. Dr. Barker's career began in Jamaica as a mathematics teacher.
Okay.
He then worked for 10 years in several UK schools. His interests lie in school effectiveness and instructional leadership, and his ultimate focus has been on the development of the whole child with a vision to establish a learning community in which everyone achieves success. He has led curriculum design and delivery in 3 countries, garnering considerable experience in national and international curricula. Dr. Barker presents regularly at international conferences, including the Middle East School Leadership Conference, the IB World Conference, and the Teach to Lead Conference, jointly hosted by the Association for Supervision and Curriculum Development, ASCD, and the US Department of Education. He has UK qualified teacher status, holds a bachelor's in mathematics and economics, a master's in multidisciplinary studies, and a doctorate in international educational leadership. Dr. Barker is also a fellow of the Institute of Mathematics UK, a fellow of the Association for the Advancement of International Education, AAIE. He holds the National Professional Qualification for Head Teachers and is a trained Danielson Framework Observer. Of course, beside every great man, there is equally a, yes, great woman. Dr. Barker is married to Denise, the university counselor at Muscat, and their union has borne 3 wonderful children. Distinguished guests, fellow colleagues, students, it is my distinct honor to present to you, yes, the very accomplished, very noble gentleman, Dr. Megel Barker. Welcome, Dr. Barker.
Thank you so very much to you, Ms. Forbes, for that, I would say, very rounded introduction of Dr. Barker. And collectively, I have to say that I've heard that we have on this panel, ladies and gentlemen, over 200 years of collective education experience and excellence. This is amazing. So we really, let's get the conversation going. As so elegantly stated by Dean Gibson, we have witnessed as educators an unprecedented disruption, interruption in our pipeline with the COVID-19 pandemic, and it continues. Allow me to share this figure with our audience, and we are almost at 150 persons on Zoom, but approximately 1.5 billion students, I hope I have that correctly, I did my research, 87% of schools were closed across the entire globe. We know that in many countries, and certainly we know Jamaica, I think, returned to in-person school just yesterday. Here in the United States, different states and school districts have reopened in person at different times. And I'm looking forward to Dr. Barker sharing what's happening in the Middle East. We know as teachers, I will share with you that a superintendent that I collaborate with has expressed that the second graders in the United States, they're coming in unable to hold a pen, a pencil. They cannot recognize their alphabets. They do not even know how to recognize their own name. So distinguished panelists, as we think about the ways in which the COVID-19 pandemic has called and demanded this reimagining, the reinvention of the role of the teacher, talk to us a little bit about what it is that we need to consider and the future direction. So let us take the considerations first. Pedagogy, the way we teach, student engagement, technology, the demand now for teachers to really pay attention to mental health or social emotional supports. How has the role of the teacher emerged? And let us begin with Principal Malloy, not to be gendered here, but certainly to start with you. My sister Heather Dunkley is a past student of Arden High. So bring your feedback, and then just to let our listeners know, whether you're on social media or in the Zoom, this is interactive, so we'll be coming to you for insights and feedback, questions and comments. Thank you. Principal Malloy.
Thank you very much, Dr. Dunkley. Good afternoon to my fellow panelists. Good afternoon to all the people at MICO, the goodly people at MICO. I've known Alvin Lawson and Dr. Pinnock for a very long time. And there are other persons I probably know and don't realize and not remembering at this point in time. But it's always a pleasure to join you at MICO. My mother is very happy because she went to the MICO, and she would tell us as children that then it was termed the poor man's university. So she'd be happy to know that I'm on this afternoon rather. So I love the theme, disrupting, and I'm gonna stop right there. I love disruptions, and there's a saying that goes, never waste a good crisis. And we're certainly in the middle of a crisis. Some of us are wasting it, but some of us are not. And I think we just want to zero in at this point in time on those who are not, and what it is that is happening that says we're not wasting it. Because those are the things, to my mind, that we are going to be able to build on as we go forward. So the first thing that comes to mind, and one of the shifts that I had to make while as an educational leader, as an individual, is to look more definitive, look more closely and be more definitive and more intentional about the relationships that I was having with the various groups of persons that I work with. That's the very first, the most important thing. How are you connecting with Professor Baker over there? How are you connecting with Lawson? How are you connecting with Bosworth that I knew from a different life? How are you connecting with young Phillips, who was a practice teacher here from Michael, who happens to be the son of somebody I went to school with? How are you connecting to all of these people? And in connecting with these people, how do you influence, and how are you influenced? And what do you understand of what they're going through? Because until you understand what's happening with people, you can't really plan and guide and direct them in a definitive way. And so that speaks quite a bit to work, study, life balance. That's very important, living life in balance. So I couch it in that context initially. So those are some of the things, as you get into the educational landscape, you have to really have front and center stage. Then, of course, technology. And I just absolutely love technology. I found something that I wrote about technology. I was handwriting this speech, but I was writing about the importance of technology. Didn't even have a computer to write with to type with at the time. Okay, so technology. The new technologies that are driving the advancement of anything that we do today. Anything you look at, technology is in the middle of it. And that is something that I noticed very early on, and I capitalized on it. It helped a little bit that I'm a librarian, so I was a little closer to it. Right. So are you now looking to the people who you're working with and aligning yourselves to them, not in a selfish way because you want to get ahead, but because it is for the common good? Are you aligning yourselves to what people in your space know and how that can advance the cause of you as a professional or the entire organization that you are a part of? So technology had, and I see a comment about contextualizing disruption. Technology was disrupting how we were doing things in school, and we weren't responding to that disruption. Because, hey, we were preparing students who were going to go out into a workspace where technology was important. We were preparing them to go to tertiary level education, to do business in a world where technology was important, and we had not yet made that shift. So you start with your policy considerations. You think of the elements and the structures that you have in education. What are the real needs of our society? And how do we address them? How do we change them? You look at what is the culture, how people learn. You know that our students that we're working with know they were born with a cell phone or a device in their hands. Yeah. When I have something that I share with my students, and I hope I'm going quickly enough. I have something that I share with my students as soon as I finish speaking to them. It says, surround yourselves with people and things that are good for you. And I usually ask them to say it in rounds, but I ask them to repeat it. Now that we are online, at assemblies, I ask them to type it. When I ask 300 students to type it at fifth form, I get maybe 15 all by the time I am finished and closing off my speech. When I ask the first formers to type it, I get all 300 and odd in a flash. They are into the technology. Are we capturing their imaginations and engaging them to use the technology in a meaningful way? Culture, economic factors, education versus the workforce versus education, and the economic factors that drive both. Which ones are we paying attention to? Are we paying attention to that at RDN? Funding, is that important? Training, you have to be able to afford training. All of those things, those are important in how you see yourself in this disrupted world that we're living in now. Our systems and processes, are we still fit for purpose? We are having this big discussion about the 6-point pathways now. I know what we're doing now as a system-wide, it's really not fit for purpose. But the systems and the processes that we're putting in place to make them work, are they aligned? Is there alignment? Do they speak to incremental changes? Again, going back to those relationships that we talk about. And the global mindset. Professor Baker, when I think of Dubai, I think of going into the Red Desert. But you're down there thinking about something totally different. In America, it's another, but it's a global mindset and we're all connected. Do we as educators have that global mindset? And is it something that we are able to communicate to our students and not just communicate to them, but to learn from that so we continue building on what we have? And I think the final point that I'd like to make here in these opening remarks is, what are the contextual issues that we consider as imperative? Is it literacy? Is it numeracy? Is it emotional and social intelligence? Is it technology? Is it funding? How do you prioritize them? So I would say to all young educators and those of us who have gray hair, let's look at all these things and think about how we prioritize them and how we pull them together in an intentional way, in that alignment that says we're serious about the business of education.
Thank you so much, Principal Malloy. I'm going to allow Dr. Dice. This is exciting to jump right in here. Dr. Dice.
Thank you very much, Dr. Dunkley. And I'm very happy to be sharing the platform with Mrs. Malloy and my brother over there. He's probably falling asleep, but he's okay. I want to totally agree with Mrs. Malloy, hitting the nail on the head, as they would say, with the connection with different people, especially close to you in your organization. And then after you develop those relationships and connections, branching out to business partners and community leaders, and going even further, going globally. After you have finished trying to make connection with your fellow men in your own country. There are a few things here when we look at taking from the standpoint of Mrs. Malloy. There are preparation programs for teachers, and if they're already teachers, then we look at professional development. Like, what does that look like for the teacher who is coming out of the pandemic and going back into the classroom? If it's the same old story that they're going to get, that you're meeting in the auditorium and we're going to go over these papers, or can you meet online and tackle some different problems that probably emerged from the pandemic? And not even, the lack of funding or the lack of food, but what are some of the problems emerge from it, which is, okay, we need to understand how to use technology. That's a problem. That's a gap that we need to fill. And then work around making goals for those problems in order to solve them. And that can be taken care of in our schoolhouses. Finding out, as she said earlier on, funding, finding out where we can tap into to get money. Are we gonna write maybe to Amazon boss to get money because he's becoming richer and richer by the second? You know, maybe some of that money can be pumped into our education systems around the world, because now Jamaica has signed a partnership so that Amazon can ship things and we can ship things from Jamaica as well and sell things in Jamaica. So where is that partnership being developed? Is it one-sided, or if it's reversal, you know? The other thing is, when you look at the teacher in itself, and we're going to go deeper into this, but I want to open with this too. The teacher as it is, what is the teacher? What is the teacher in the classroom? Is it the same old chalk and talk, or we're going to look at characteristics that govern the 21st century teacher as a teacher learner? And some of those have to do with the teacher, how the philosophy of that teacher, how they view students, how they view learning. Are they going to treat the students as producers of their own development? And also, if they're going to implement different strategies that will lead to project-based learning. Because now it's time for us to take the leadership role of the teacher and start to, it's a sort of union, isn't it, to call it facilitator, but what does it entail, the facilitation of learning? Because we use that term, but we're still standing in front of the students and still dictating to them. So we need to refocus those thinking. And I'm gonna hand over to Dr. Barker here as we, do the roundtable.
Thank you, Dr. Dice.
Yes.
So Dr. Barker, we're over to you. What time is it, by the way, where you are?
Good evening, everyone. Let me see if I can figure out the time. It's 1:46 a.m. So I have to be very, very soft in the way that I speak. And so if I come across a little bit gentle, how I share my points, it's not because of a lack of passion. It's because I know that I don't want to wake the family in the house. So permit me that little latitude as I speak on this. Good evening, everyone, and I'm really feeling quite honored to be on this panel. I mean, a number of, Dr. Dice is a brother, but Dr. Dunkley and certainly Miss Malloy, we have interacted from time to time, and it's the first time we're side by side. And the biggest challenge for me is coming after such a rousing and so, comprehensive description of what the challenge is, Ms. Malloy, and followed by Dr. Dice. It leaves me very little to do more than say hi. But as you were speaking, I started to think, the idea of a global reset and the emerging role of the teacher. And it's funny, I started to reminisce about the time when I was in school, and I had a teacher called Miss Jones in grade 4. And when I look at Miss Jones, the things that she used to do, and I'm coming back to Miss Malloy's reference here about the connections. There are certain people, who are amazing teachers, not because of what they teach, but the thing that you learn when you sit at their feet, the kind of things that you learn. And I learned from Ms. Jones the value of service, the value of believing in someone's ability, even when they didn't know what they were capable of. And that was grade 4, and the fact is I went to Teachers College because Ms. Jones saw my mom one day and said, "What is Miguel doing?" And she said, Miguel, and I didn't do very well in high school. I say to people, I'm a bad student, but a good learner. I didn't do very well in high school. And I was thinking of just taking a year doing something. And Ms. Jones said, send him to Teachers College. And that's how I ended up in Teachers College. And the point is she took an interest in my life, even after I've left grade 4, to the point where she was still influencing my life. And when I reflect on my life, I go back into that. Now, why am I sharing that story? It's simply because as much as we want to, and I started to look at what the role of the teacher is post-pandemic. And I want to say BC, before COVID, yeah? I want to say, what is the role of the teacher before COVID and the role of the teacher after the disease in the time AD. So we're going to reshape what these things mean now, because that's how the world is going to look at it. Has it changed significantly? My analysis on it is that it hasn't changed significantly. What we have had is a way the role of the teacher has gone in many different directions. And a reset means to go back to what the role of the teacher really, really was. And it was about building connections. It really was about making sure that our students in front of us achieve full success, achieve success. And so when we're talking about technology and when we're talking about what the pandemic has done, it has allowed us to go back and say, we have a chance to recalibrate. We have a chance to really look at what we consider to be teaching. And perhaps the role of the teacher was never about the teaching, but more about the role of the learning. And perhaps it's a time for us, because when technology comes in and when Google is available, what is there to teach? What is there to teach? Let's think about that. And the pandemic hasn't changed that. When the pandemic came, majority of us automatically went online. We were able to function, we could deliver learning. These technologies were not new. They were always available. So what is the role of the teacher? What was the role of the teacher? So I just want to share a little on that, the idea of what was the role of the teacher. So first of all, today I was doing a presentation to some new students to my school. And I said, we need to stop focusing on what we teach and focusing on how we teach. Very, very important. Not what we teach, but on how we teach. The teachers who have had the greatest impact in our life taught differently. They had a way of teaching. And so the flip of that, the reciprocal of that, is also that we need to stop focusing on what students learn and emphasize and prioritize and be very intentional about how they learn. It is critical that we take that mindset. And so my angle on this is that the mindset that was needed in the beginning is still the same mindset. The issue is that we have not invested enough in promoting that mindset. So it's not about what we teach, it's about how we teach. The sad part is that when we recruit teachers for their knowledge. You're a math teacher, and you're a science teacher. And just before, the point is, we are not math teachers and science teachers and English teachers. We are teachers of students. We are. And when we take that approach to looking at it and say, I'm not a teacher of mathematics, I'm a teacher of students, we start realizing that this is about personalized learning. It's about making sure that you have the conditions for powerful learning to occur in your classroom. And that is not a one-size-fits-all approach, because now we're looking at our students as individuals. And so I know that the group of people here that's listening, a lot of them are new teachers going into the classroom. And I want to make sure that they understand that this is a mindset approach. This is a mindset. You see, when you walk into a classroom, the impact you have on people, young people, is I would say permanent. It's really a permanent impact you have. And you need to make sure that every second, every minute that you spend in their presence is one that gives them the opportunity to understand their role in society. And so I know that I'll get a chance to come up, but my main point here is that the mindset that needs to go into teaching right now. One, our global reset gives us a chance to go back to what the role of the teacher always was. It was always a list of 100 things, I remember. Everything, remember when I was in Teachers College, it was always 100 things that we needed to do. Right. But the mind shift that needs to take us back to where we need to go is the idea that this is not about what we teach, but how we teach. And it's not about what they learn. It's about how they learn. And when the focus is on how students learn, when you walk into a classroom and say how they learn is more important than what they learn, then you start thinking about the nature of the activities that you share with them, the kind of conversations that you ask them to have amongst themselves, the kind of challenges that you place in front of them. So our global reset is really a reset, because when someone resets, when you restart your phone, you go right back to what it was, the factory default, you go back to that setting and say, let us know, go from there. So that's it's about the mindset. And I think we're all speaking on that, but we'll take that angle on it. Let's focus on the mindset so that when we start again, we are in a place that everyone flourishes.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Barker. Thank you to all of our panelists, such powerful and relevant feedback and comments and insights. Let us set the expectations for engagement, for learning. We see that we have some questions and comments. Some hands are raised, so we're asking that if you do hear something that jumps out, because so many things are resonated, so many ideas, please type in the chat. If you would like to raise your hand, we will absolutely unmute you and allow you after each segment. As we do, that's just a promise in practice in education to come in, and then we will go back. So right at this time, we've heard so many pieces, and let me just pull out my takeaway, Dr. Dice. I want you to talk a little bit more about teacher prep programs. We heard Principal Malloy about professional learning and how that now needs to change, and Dr. Barker extending this relationship, the what and the how. Dr. Barker, I'm just going to push a little bit and say, and the why we teach, and the who we teach, and we bring all of those components to this work. Right before you jump in, I'm seeing and hearing about access and equity. We're not really labeling it because people just like to use that word now as a buzzword. And equity and access, they're not buzzwords. So let's really drill down. What does it mean in terms of everything that you guys have shared? How do teachers now ensure that with our young people coming back to us in need of so much, that in our practices and across the systems and processes, Principal Malloy, you spoke about, that we will have equity and access. So let's hear from some of our participants. Rory T. Richards, your hand is raised. We only have 1 hour. I told Alvin, I said, oh, we'll be done in 90 minutes. I think we need a full 5 hours. We could take Dr. Barker through to the beginning of his morning. So Rory, very quickly, just ask your question in 1 minute, please. Thank you. Unmute and ask your question. And you can also, again, type in the chat. If you're on social media, you could just put it in the comment section and we will feed it through the Zoom. Thank you. Rory. Are they able to unmute? So Rory, we're not hearing you. Do you just want to go ahead and type your question in the chat? Thank you. Lawman Lynch, who I happen to know serves on the Jamaica Diaspora Northeast Education Sector. I know that you had several feedback and questions. Lawman, go ahead. Oh, Rory said no question. Okay, your hand was raised. Thank you. All right, Lawman Lynch.
Thank you very much. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, loud and clear. Thank you.
First of all, I think the preamble from each panelist was excellent. I want Dr. Barker just to expand a little bit more on his concept that, you know, the focus should be placed on who or what who we're teaching opposed to what we teach, because I think that concept needs to come full circle so that the educators online can have a greater understanding as to the point you are making.
Thank you so much. So Dr. Barker, you want to spend 3 minutes and then we're going to move on. Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Lawman Lynch. And thanks for your comments in the chat.
All right, so thank you for your question. Let's expound on it, and then 3 minutes, you're putting me in trouble. I'll try my best to just clarify. So I think part of what needs to be understood here is that I work in the International Baccalaureate. And so it's really a skills-based program, a concept-based program as well. And so the primacy of knowledge is diminished in the IBE, not because knowledge is not important. It's just that the focus is on the acquisition of skills first. The belief that when students learn how to learn, then they will be able to learn faster. You know, I am a fully educated Jamaican. I did all of my main learning in Jamaica up to university. So I can speak about the difference that I've experienced. I've also been trained in Jamaica, and I can speak about the difference in the mindset that teachers need to have in order to deliver this kind of pedagogy. So when I speak about this, it's not so much a one-sided view. It's more of an understanding that I've come to due to the experience that I've had in both systems as learners and as educators, and then leaders of educators, you know, teacher leaders, so to speak. And so the focus on skills automatically diminishes the importance of knowledge, because you can't do both at the same time. If you prioritize knowledge, then it means you're going to come into the class, you're going to make sure that they remember what you've taught them. But anyone who has looked at the Bloom's taxonomy will realize that the approach that we have taken for years is seeing the Bloom's taxonomy as a ladder, almost like you start at one point, you comprehend, you remember, then you get into analysis, then synthesis, then you get into evaluation, and so on. The problem is, when you look at a program like the IB, it actually is an inverted Bloom's. We begin at evaluation. You know, when Dr. Dice talk about problem-based learning, the challenge is always at the highest level, higher order thinking. It's pitched at the highest level. We tend to, my experience of education when I was being taught was, you know, you have to remember stuff first, because how can a child be able to apply something when they don't have the knowledge? That's a perspective of the teachers and even when I spoke with teachers, they would share that perspective. Like, they need to know this first before they can do that. The problem is there's only so much time that you have in front of a child, you know? And so if you focus a lot on ensuring that they remember something, then you have not spent enough time on them developing the capacity to evaluate and to think critically and to think creatively. So if we're going to spend time on those important skills, then it has to become the priority within the program to say that is what we are focusing on. That's what we're focusing on. We're focusing on development of skills. Now, the other part of it that also brings this into a kind of the IB, and I want to share on that because that is something that it's a mindset that we need to have, is the idea of context, you know? So what we say, we teach content within contexts. We teach content within the context. So we provide the real world experiences, and then our students seek the knowledge because they can. You know, they have the phones, as Ms. Malloy said. They have their phones, they have internet, they have WhatsApp, they have all this stuff that they can go find that knowledge that we had so much value on. So the mindset that our teachers take, and it is taking our teachers outside of their comfort zone, because you have to remember that we first become a math teacher, and I'm a math teacher by training, by being good at math. So when I go into in front of a class, I want to show them that I'm good at math. And so you end up asking teachers, put that to the side and let's focus on developing the skills. And I'm like, but that's not what I was hired for. Now, for that to happen though, schools and systems have to also conform. I know Ms. Malloy mentioned that idea about the fact that we need to have the system alignment for this to happen. You know, and I really, one of the things I try not to do is speak on topical issues that have a political piece to it, simply because I don't want to come across as being political. But I do have viewpoints. And I read your piece today, Ms. Malloy, just so you know. I read your thing today from start to the end, because I share some of those, and I have some questions myself, but that's for another time. But the point is, it's about the entire system and schools creating the conditions, not only for students to learn in an environment that we can call risky, but for teachers as well to take risks and feel that they can do this without being pulled into the office and say, you know, the kids say that you're spending too much time on them doing this thing, but the other class is doing digestive system and you are behind. They need the space as well. So when we shift to the how, it's not one teacher shifting to the how. Yeah, that it's not possible because we're all on the same train, and you cannot have one, you know, you say if you're on the train, all of them arrive at some point, you know, it's the same train. And you can't say, okay, you know, you have to see it as everybody on board, all on board. And so I know that I cannot expound on this in the way that might bring it to the clarity for you to understand, but I'm giving that analogy so that at least you understand that the idea that it happens in the conditions being made present, and that's really where it comes. If the shift is on how, then everything starts to make more sense. If we say how they learn is more important than what they learn. It's not that what they learn isn't important, but it's more important. And that's when the resources go into it and the time is taken to put the systems in place to ensure that both teachers and students benefit from that.
Thank you so much, Mr. Lorman Lynch, for your question. And thank you, Dr. Barker, for that response. We have one question from Kadeem Henry, I think, and then we will continue with our panelists. Kadeem, if someone can unmute Kadeem, and then you can ask your question quickly. Thank you. All right, not seeing Kadeem, and so we're so pressed for time. Kadeem, if you could type your question in the chat. So let's just talk a little bit about Principal Malloy, this systems and processes, it keeps coming back, it's emerging, right? And we're hearing the undercurrent of innovation. So where does innovation now sit? So what would we identify as we think about how we're going to reimagine, reconceptualize, re-implement the teacher role? What are the exact systems that we must ensure are in place? And I didn't have a chance to read your piece, and I will certainly look at that. I'm not that proficient to browse it quickly while I'm here. So we could bring that to the table. But what exact systems do we now need to build? And sometimes we don't know what we don't know, because we did not know what we did not know with COVID. When I was a high school principal, I would not have imagined that people would have been millionaires on something known as TikTok. I would not have even conceived it, that e-commerce would create the biggest wealth gain globally. So what systems need to be in place? We'll begin with Principal Malloy and invite one of our other panelists in the conversation. Thank you.
One of the systems that I think of at all times, it's perhaps not even, formally categorized as a system. I go back to the whole thing of relationships and how we communicate. We have to be operating in such a manner that we are hearing each other, we're understanding each other, and we're seeing the changes as they come. That's very, very important. I asked the question, are we fit for purpose? And it might sound very high-falutin in some ways, but the way we're teaching, how we're teaching, is that really working for our students? That's a question I ask all the time. I love to ask, should I have done it differently? As much as it might seem successful. So here's a question then. Can our students relate to how we package our lessons? When we assess them, are we assessing them in the manner that gives them the best opportunity to succeed? I remember as a classroom teacher, I taught literature mostly, and I would give art assignments. I would give assignments for students to create magazines. I remember one assignment we were doing the chrysalids, and students were pretending to be Bernie down in the Gulf War in reporting, because the chrysalid was about a race war. And there are so many different ways that we can look at what we're doing. Are we connecting the dots across the different subjects and discipline areas in our schools? Why do we keep operating in silos? When you go out into the world of work and the world of everything else, are you operating in silos? No. So that's part of the systems that I'm talking about. Do we analyze every piece of data and then reconnect them? When you look at the students' performance, are you drilling down to the students' background? Are you drilling down to the emotional and social state of the student? Are you drilling down to the relationship that the students is having with that teacher? Is it just to say that Nadine is not a good teacher, or is it a case that Nadine is just not connecting with this group of students? So those are part and parcel of our systems and processes. We have a tendency to create one-size-fits-all scenarios, and it's not happening now. Let me give another example. We have been teaching since March 2020 online, and we are teaching all sciences. And if you look at our CXC results, we're doing well. What could have caused that? because we have been able to transition to this real life lab. That is your home. That is your backyard. That is your front porch. That is hopping across the fence to your neighbor. The little old lady over there who is doing backyard gardening. That has become the agriculture plot. We have a farm here at Arden. And there's so many things. Being fit for purpose, meaning that you are able to pivot in that space that you are in. You are able to use what is in front of you to parlay that into that real life, more exciting experience. And we are finding that it is becoming more exciting for a student. When a student decides to mix, let's say, an OTT apple drink, or saucy apple, some people call it. When you squeeze lime in it, it changes color. It becomes a pretty pink as against a dull burgundy looking color before. What is that chemical reaction that's taking place right in your kitchen? And some parents had a little bit of a struggle working through that. I joined a PE class a few hours ago, and I was jumping around, not quite as coordinated as the students, but they are in their PE outfits. So that's the whole thing about being fit for purpose, being able to pivot, being able to understand who your students are, what are their circumstances, and then plan to take that into consideration. So you begin to move, to pull away from the fact that I'm in an era where my roof is really a zinc roof, because you've moved away from that now, and you've put everything in context, and everything has a purpose and a place in that lesson that you're teaching. I don't know if it makes sense, but it does for me.
And it makes sense for all of us to listen. And thank you so much. I think especially my understanding is that we have some very new teachers, and I think that that's a guiding question, being fit for purpose, and what are now the new systems, the innovation that can happen that does not require this input of resources, that the child in a home can still participate in science right in their home in learning. And that's a very powerful reframing, because oftentimes it's a deficit. They must have this and they must have that. No, everything that they need is actually sitting right in the kitchen or in the bathroom or sitting somewhere in the backyard. So thank you so much. Dr. Dice, this takes us to now teacher preparation programs. How do we now need to prepare this new, I'm going to call it workforce, but it's not just new, it's ongoing. We had a lot of veteran teachers who struggled to use the word of the century, Principal Malloy, to pivot to virtual learning, who is now struggling again to return to in-person learning. So what are the considerations for teacher preparation programs? Michael is at the forefront of preparing teachers in not just Jamaica, but the Caribbean. So what do we now need to consider? And what does ongoing professional learning, what should it look like, knowing that when we do workshops, the return is only 5% that teachers are able to translate in their practice?
That's a very good question. And I don't really have all the answers to that one. I remember last year when we were finishing up with the training and support for teachers during the pandemic. There were many questions as to if this is going to be translated into universities for training of teachers, or we're just going to use it as just a fast way of reaching students. And then we done away with these strategies and go back to our brick and mortar. It's very difficult when you look from the wider aspect of it and looking down, like an eagle eye view to all the places and the systems that are in place in our country. And just like my fellow panelists here, you find out that you will get very political with this, because the umbrellas that are stopping you from getting wet in these times, there are people holding up these umbrellas, and you really need to take a shower, but there are people holding up the umbrellas and stopping you from even feeling the drops of rain. And I'm putting it like that for people to think about it. But on the ground, where you have, as Mrs. Malloy said, that in our own kitchens. There are project-based learning strategies and materials right there that we can use and get in touch with educators. Parents, one of the big connections with this is parents. The parents really need to get on board with students. And the teacher really need to tap into that. There are other areas where the parent and students need to get more connection with schools, instead of just saying that it's the school's job to do this. And I'm taking that approach to link it with teacher preparation program. The universities and colleges that are training teachers really need to tap into these everyday low bar what do you call it, collaboration with from home to school. The universities really need to say, okay, this is what is happening in these communities. How are you prepared to meet the demand that these communities are fleshing out to you, and they're screaming that this is the method that we have for learning? How are the teachers who are going in these communities after training, how are they going to meet the demand? The other part of it is that we need to, going back to funding, we really need to stop talking about what we do not have and talk about what we have. Because last year when Dr. Barker and I, we did some training, and I remember, Dr. Barker, you remember this system thinking. And it came to me when Mrs. Malloy talking earlier to look at the pieces and then pull them back together in our systems. It goes right back to your point last year, which is bigger than a point. We talk about systems thinking instead of analyzing these parts. Look at the overall system, how it worked. And in the pandemic, these technology pieces work. They work for collaboration between teachers and students, and they work for home and school. And we could go in depth with this, but I'm just dropping things on the table here. The last point I want to make, because I want others to share too. The last point I want to make is, there's an article that I wrote in January this year, January or February, and it talks about building international learning communities, not just PLCs for our school, but international learning communities that teachers who have the tools nowadays, and the schools with the tools in Jamaica and in America and in Muscat, Oman, and in Japan and so on. They come together to form these learning communities. And this is where global learning takes place, where a teacher can be up like Dr. Barker now, up in the middle of the night, and we are just going to bed and we are saying, let's tap into his resources. What did he learn? What did he use today? I want to implement that strategy tomorrow. I want to get students to be very centered in their learning. I don't want to be the teacher who is showing off about my math. I want to step back. I want to give these students the tools that Dr. Barker is using in the IB program, International School, and step back in Jamaica or in the Caribbean or wherever we are, and give students the opportunity to be producers of their own learning. Where we don't want to change the total system, but we want to rethink it to give students power, instead of giving them information only. Let's give them power, okay?
That's a great note. Give students power, to empower them, student voice and agency to continue. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're just joining us via social media, we are here at the only place that you need to be, wherever you are in the globe. Global Reset, the emerging role of the teacher, sponsored by the Michael University College Practicum Unit, hosting a series of international webinars. I would like to say to you, Rory T. Richards has put in our Zoom chat around systems, agility, communication, and the concept of the metaverse is artificial intelligence. And Dr. Dice, that's building the international communities of learning and practice. So at this time, let us ask something that is really concrete, that seems to be a struggle globally. This notion of the learning loss, and how teachers, it's not just that our students had a learning loss, it's also that our adults now, again, need a retooling, a reshifting, noting That Dr. Barker, you said the system, we know in America, we said we don't want to return to the old system because if you look at the failure, especially for children of color, the system did not work. So we are thankful and we do not intend to return to that old system. So this Principal Malloy is that opportunity that you're speaking about, emerging from this crisis of the pandemic, that we must not only survive, but thrive beyond. So on that note, let's talk a little bit about early literacy. If it is that I had a teacher, I nearly fired him, Mr. Barker. He said, well, whatever the kids can Google, we don't need to teach. But it's true, right? But then, of course, we have our state assessment. So why am I raising that? What now do teachers need to emphasize around the science of reading, around literacy? How are we now reconceptualizing literacy as we think about the teacher? Not just reading and writing, but literacy in terms of critical thinking, creative thinking, problem solving, right? How must we now reimagine the teacher role as ensuring that the students are literate? Because all of you panelists have emphasized and punctuated that if our scholars are literate, then the world is theirs. They can create the metaverse, that they can complete the IB, they can do what it is, they can access the tools to get the information they need. So how do we reconceptualize and reimagine literacy for our students as teachers? And we'll begin with you, Dr. Barker.
All right, so we have always put the cart before the horse, always. You know, I refrain from commenting on, you know, topical stuff, but most times I see the cart being put before the horse. You know, the sixth form issue is a cart being put before the horse. You know, PEP exam is a cart being put before the horse. You know, the reality of it is that if once we start to prioritize the important things, and when I say that we need to prioritize stuff like skills, it's not because I have my personal view here. If you look at any research about the top 20 skills that the top organizations in the world are looking for in graduates, it is around the problem solving. It's around communication skills. It's around critical thinking skills. It's not mathematics. It's not, you know, it's not those. And let's face it, these are very important as well, but they're not the important parts of the learning process. So to pick up your point about early learning and the way the system should work is that, again, they have to learn your ABCs and your 1, 2, 3s, you know, but we have to infuse the skills from there. And we need to have what we call a vertical articulation of how those skills are developed from early years all the way through to university. What we have is a disjointed approach to it. We have a very disjointed approach to it. And if you get into some good schools, you'll certainly see that. You'll see it in the good schools. And when I say the good schools, I say that with a grain of salt because, you know, some people say you get the good students, so you have a good school. And some people feel that, but we have seen good schools with good students and they turn out bad graduates as well. So we know that it's not only that. We still need leadership and we need people who know what they're doing and people who understand what good looks like. But the issue here is that we do not have a vertical articulation as part of a national policy on how we develop what is important for economic growth and economic development. It doesn't exist. What we have is disjointed outcomes. We have one school who does it, and then the kids go to a school and it doesn't happen anymore. So for example, you know, I hear a lot of people say the Jamaican education system is one of the best in the world because when we go to the United States, we are at the top of the system. But what we don't remember is, you know, and I say this, I get controversial. I say, what you don't remember is that when you left your community, you might have been the only one who passed common entrance. Everybody took it, or everybody had a chance to take it. There's only 3 or 4 of you who got it. And many times it's going to be one of you from the humble background that Dr. Dunkley comes from, and most of them coming from the housing scheme. Yeah, it's a reality. We have a system, you know, you mentioned equity and access. You know, when the ROSE program was being implemented, those were the buzzwords, equity and access. It was implemented to provide equity and access. When the ROSE program, the reform of secondary education, ROSE 1, 2, and 3, they were about equity and access, and we're still talking about that at the moment, because essentially this is about equity and access. Of course, the pandemic showed us, it demonstrated to us, it revealed to us what we were hiding from, that there is a disparity in the opportunities that our students in Jamaica face. It just showed us, because the moment some schools went online, some people went, yes, we can go online, but with what and how? And what can I have credit? You know, and that's when it changed. You start realizing that the disparity was always there, but the pandemic revealed it. And you know, it's just an interesting piece. So the conversation is much bigger than that, but I would want to emphasize that if we're going to be producing, you see, in my view, education needs to stop being seen as a service and more seen as economics. It's production. You see, when we start seeing economics, the education system as products, as much as we see mining and energy, and as much as we want to make agriculture, what we see education as a service. And you see, when you're offering a service, you believe it is supposed to be on a continuum, good in some places, but when you're delivering products, they have to be at the same standard all, because if they're not, then people will know and will not trust your product. And so at the moment, we have education being seen through the wrong lens, as a service and not as a product that needs to contribute positively to economic development. I'll make one quote here. I know I was reading this article that talked about how the best school systems outperform others. And they cited systems like Finland and South Korea and, you know, all these countries that we hear about all the time. And there was a quote from a South Korean administrator, and he said, the quality of an education system will never exceed the quality of its teachers. It will never exceed the quality of its teachers. And you see, if you're not, I know Ms. Malloy mentioned that point already about, I think it's in your reading today, if I remember correctly, about, you know, the conditions for your teachers are also the conditions for your learners. I don't know if it's in the reading or today. But the point here is that when we invest in teachers, to go back to Dr. Dice's point, when we invest in teachers, it's about what we invested. You know, if we're investing in their being knowledge and lots of knowledge and they're good, no math and no science and no this, then that's what they're going to do when they go into the classroom. But if we invest in their ability to impart skills to our students, teach skills, and we assess them on their ability and their understanding of the primacy of that in the learning process, then we start to see the kind of growth that many, many systems have invested in. If you look at the Finland system, you'll see they have something called phenomenon-based learning. Yeah, we talk about problem-based and they have gone beyond that. You know, they're talking about phenomenon-based learning. Yeah, the idea of the infusion of students into real world experiences, and then they have to figure this out. You know, they're talking about the entry level to enter the teaching profession. You know, they're talking about the starting salaries for teachers. You know that in Finland, a teacher is paid almost at the level of any other profession. They're seen in high esteem because they say, rather than people becoming highly paid in the system by being 20 or 30 years in the system. And so that becomes what you call a longevity battle. They start high salaries for entering the profession. So everybody can start with a livable wage and be able to focus on their development as a practitioner. There are too many things, you know, I could go all over on this. So as I'm talking to young teachers, and I know we're coming to the end, I want to share one small piece of nugget that I want to share. Most of the things I share are not coming from me. I'm no one. I'm coming from an humble experience educated in Jamaica. It comes from my experience by mixing with people and hearing their ideas and allowing that to shape my thinking. You know, when I was trained as a teacher, and you're going to be going out into the classroom as well, you know, we used to think of teaching as talking, and the students are learning when they are listening. This is the conception we have. The teacher, as when we're teaching when we're talking, and the students are learning when they are listening. So they say, pay attention, right? Listen, I'm here to teach. But a stance that we need to take, and this is all about the reset, going back to what it really was. The stance that we need to take is, what if we consider learning as talking, and we're teaching when we're listening? Just think about that perspective where the teacher decides to be the listener in the classroom and creating the conditions where the students are talking. That is a stance that we can take as educators. What if we consider that we are teaching when we're listening and they're learning when they're talking? You see, when we start thinking like that, you'll realize the importance of shifting the way we organize instruction. You know, those episodes of learning, you know, where students come into class like they're waiting for the next Netflix series. They say, I need to come back, to be continued. That's what happens when we start, you know, and I'll finish now. I'm sorry, Dr. Dunkley, I'm gonna finish now, but you know, you give me a big question, you get a big answer. That's the quality of a good question. If I'd answered no, or yes, you know that it's not a good one. But you ask a good question, so you get a good answer. So the key thing here, guys, as you go into the classroom, it's about mindsets. You know, it's about mindsets. And so Dr. Dice knows that I'm all for the critical thinking. But if you ask me about how we implemented PEP, I'd say we haven't done it correctly. I had a look through the data. A lot of lessons were there about how teachers would assess critical thinking. A lot of workshops from the ministry about assessing critical thinking, but there was none about teaching critical thinking. And the idea that these are things that are not taught, but only assessed, is the first misconception about what is happening in other parts of the world. Yeah. So when we focus on that vertical articulation of skills, we will have the education system. And then when the next pandemic comes, we will not be scrambling and have to even pivot. And when the teachers pivot, then we have to pivot the students as well. Everybody is already agile, ready to go.
Thank you so much, Dr. Barker. And thank you so much to our participants in the chat. Rochelle Smith-Haslam says, these points are excellent. I'm so empowered. Kadeem Henry said, great point. Doreen authors, Eureka, I found it wonderful. At last I get someone to agree with me. The students learn when they speak. Rayanon Taylor said, excellent point. And Dr. Barker he's emphatic, you know, Principal Malloy and Dr. Dice. I don't want to be political, but education itself is so political. It is a political good, whatever we call it, a service. It's an institution that is shrouded and enmeshed in politics, because all of these decisions, what we teach, who we teach, how we organize, how schools are rated, is all political. On that note, we're talking about literacy. Early literacy, yes, but literacy in terms of thinking and being creative and critical and innovative. Let's talk about workforce development to extend the conversation. Principal Malloy, your high school, Dr. Dice, you're here in the diaspora in the Northeast in New York, and New York is considered, if we get it right in New York City, it's the largest public school system in the United States, and we can get it right. We say we will get it right for the rest of the United States. Principal Malloy, Dr. Dice, workforce development coupled with literacy. What do we as educators need to ensure that we know focus on? Thank you. Principal Malloy, we're going to get you right in here. Thank you. And then Dr. Dice. And it is 5:33. We end promptly at 6 p.m. I don't want Mr. Lawson to put us out. And he will also be posting his evaluation link in the chat. So we'll just keep our remarks succinct. Thank you, Principal Malloy, and then Dr. Dice. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to quickly connect back to the economic value of education. Education versus the workforce versus education. Which one leads? For me, it's symbiotic. So you now have to look at what it is you are preparing your students for. And in the same manner that the students will have a learning curve that they must navigate, our teachers have that learning curve too. We have a tendency to assume that teachers must know, and that's like so wrong. They don't always know. And so as administrators, we have to take, and I suppose we could take it further to say in our ministry, We have to spend time looking carefully at the policy directives that we decide we want to embrace. And here at Arden, what we do is we look at things from a policy perspective. It may be just a paragraph. It may be something that we have agreed on as a group. We have some smaller groups we call design teams that we build out into the school. And then we decide now how we're going to get various groups to lead the empowerment process. Our empowerment process for our staff, that is led by a group called our Professional Learning Community Design Team. And that team is responsible for fleshing out, along with me and the senior management team, what it is that we have to get our teachers engaged in. How do we help them navigate that learning curve to get to the place where when they get in front of a classroom, whether it is a virtual or a physical classroom, they are able to lead from the front, from the side, or from behind, whichever the case may be. How do they engage the students in that learning process? Because Miguel, you made an important point. We learn at every stage of the game. It's not just when you're listening, you're learning. It's in the speaking and working through. It's in the connections and the interconnectedness. It is in making the mistakes. It is in understanding how you work through all the errors to get to the solution. Edison overused. He made a gazillion mistakes, but in each mistake, he learned a little bit more what not to do. So it is in pulling together all of that kind of collaborative environment. And I say, how did that work for us at Arden in a practical way? When we decided that we were going to go down this road of understanding the technology, embracing it and integrating it, it meant that we were asking questions that no one could answer, because this was not something that was widespread and pervasive in the education system. We went down the road of who is going to help us? And we got the tough response of no one, at least no one we could afford. And we were intentional and deliberate in saying to ourselves that if there is no one who can give us assistance in the immediate environment that we're in, then we need to go learn for ourselves. And so we created that scenario for ourselves where we had teams who were making sure that they're going out there, doing the research, and we were coming back. And I find that our WhatsApp groups at Arden are some of the most efficient WhatsApp groups we're in. And so that I have been in, we were tossing information in there. People were turning ideas around. We were agreeing and disagreeing, and we were navigating these curves. And in that way, we were able to come together as a community of practice around this vision that we had. And so we were able to teach ourselves. That's something that I would commend to any young teacher. Align yourselves to people who are thinking in a particular direction. You don't have to go to a university and do a course. You don't have to sign up anywhere. You can teach yourselves, and that's the most important thing. And I say why that is very important. Because things are changing almost daily. When we started using what we thought was the best version of Google Classroom, Google Suite in 2020, well, we were using it before, but when we started using it daily, we thought it was the best thing since sliced bread. And now it is something that is so far beyond where we started out. We were at a function recently and 2 teachers were there, and we were at the table and students were there as well. And we were discussing the latest features in Google Classroom and how we were going to use them and what we were going to get out of it. And Zuri was sitting closer to me and she said, Miss Malloy, do you know that you're talking about Google Suite like it's your children? And we were like, huh? And that's how vested we have become. And you have to get that kind of, I tend to come from a position that is not necessarily very, it tends to relate to emotions. But I find that in education, you have to feel for it. You have to want it. You have to be able to take it up and turn it around in your hands and feel it and understand it and live it and taste it and smell it to make it work. And for me, I kept thinking about what that girl said to me, that we were talking about the tool, the platform that we're using, like it belonged to us, we owned it. And that's how you're gonna have to own your own workforce development skills for your sake and for the sake of your students. My thoughts.
Thank you. Thank you
That's
so much,
very good.
Principal Loy. Yes, we cannot do for our scholars what we cannot do for ourselves. Dr. Dice, what say
Yes.
you? We're coming
Yeah.
up on the final 20 minutes.
I could go on and on with Mrs. Malloy and Dr. Barker here.
We want to say amen, right?
Yes,
Free time.
amen. Yeah, I want to add to Mrs. Malloy here is the idea from the college. To look from their perspective when they're training teachers and to see what I'm wondering if they're looking 5 years down the road, that when they train this teacher, what's going to happen 5 years, let alone look 10 years down the road, because that teacher might live 30 years to teach in a classroom, and see if they're instilling a lifelong learning mindset in the teacher. So we have to look from that perspective, from the university perspective or the teacher training perspective. And then you can pull yourself back and then look at, from the teacher's perspective, like what caused you to want to be a teacher in the first place? If it's to educate students towards a purpose, towards their purpose, to educate them towards a future that we have no idea what's going to happen, you know? So then why would we train them for a specific job when we don't know what's going to be out there in 5 years, let alone in the next 2 years when technology is turning over so rapidly? We don't know. So there are two aspects there, from the teacher personally, and then from the university training program or teacher training program. And then to what Mrs. Malloy said, to couple with that is the data-driven aspect of education. Like, what are some of the aspects of career choices and so on that you want to educate students about, to become a part of that and to help them to contribute back to society? So the idea is capital. Do we count these students as citizens in a country and call them the capital of the country? So it's human capital. And resource. So that's where resource management comes in. So if our, and I'm gonna go out on a limb here to say this, if our countries own our students as capital, then they would never treat them like that. They would never treat them, and they would never educate them in a deficient way that they're doing now. They would never do that if they're capital, because a businessman who owns his own business, they treat the business with respect, and they will fire people who are not pulling in the weight. They're not pulling in the profit. They're not doing what they're supposed to do. Even if you take a grocery store, for example, they get turnover like crazy because the person is probably stealing or not pulling their weight. So why is it that you treat your schools that way if you're a nation builder? Why is it that you treat them like that? So that's for capital. And the last part of this course is to look at what, go back to what Dr. Barker said about education as a service. And I remember getting in trouble when I came first to started teaching in Florida. And I was there teaching value education and so on in my classroom. And the principal called me in the office and she said to me, I want you to know that this is a service. And I said, education is not a service. We are nation builders, we're teachers. We're not here, we're not bank tellers, it's not a service. And education is for nation building, it's for citizenry. It's not where we treat them nicely and, oh, I'm so sorry that I did this. No, you're not sorry. You're supposed to build morally development individuals, ethical individuals, and then science training and math, and helping them to be literate. It is not a service. If you're looking at it as a service, then let's look at it as a service to nation building, not to treat them like a client. It's where we're not a client, you know? So they really need to take that idea out and start looking at schools as nation building platform, that students are in formation. And if teachers are in formation in colleges or teacher training programs, then they should treat them like that as well, that they're in formation for nation building. And then if they're capital, then why not pay them their due share of nation building, as it's not even a reward, but pay them their fair due for nation building. You know, that's where I think maybe the buck stops. I don't know.
I think, well, we know, absolutely. I think that we have stated it. We should be emphatic when we talk about really compensating educators. There's nowhere in the world, well, we heard the outliers, the Finlands, but when you think about the majority of countries, teachers tend to exist at the substandard of the pay scale. And we have to call it out. If we really value education, we have to call them out. We have to do honest labeling and not allow education to be politicized. So it's a talking point only during elections, when teachers are still underpaid, when principals are still underpaid, when the conditions for teaching and learning are still under-resourced. And yes, Dr. Barker, we are indeed political, and the support, the nation building, I like it. Dr. Dice is a dancer. He said, get information for nation building, right? And so here we are. Boy, this was indeed, as my kids would say in the United States, this session is lit. Let me remind our audience that if you participate, if you do complete the evaluation, which Mr. Alvin Lawson will drop in the chat, you will receive a certificate, pardon me, of participation. I'm reading, for 2 or more sessions. So you must complete the evaluation for 2 or more sessions, so you get your certificate of participation. We have heard a lot. We are at the final hour, and with this panel, we have to give sufficient time for closing remarks. I want to say, Dr. Dice, you raise a point, and it's going to be a challenge to those of us who mentor and supervise and recruit and retain the teaching force, is we have to allow risk-taking. We have to empower teachers, and we cannot chastise them if we don't empower them. And so even in my own practice, I would always say, if teachers break the rules for children, that's fine, because sometimes we need to break the rules for kids. Not foolishness. We know what foolishness is. We're talking about substantive, deep, profound, impactful change on students' lives. And we have to empower teachers to break the rules. On that note, we have come to the end of a spirited but meaningful discussion. This is not just a talk. You have given us lots of nuggets, panelists, lots of action pieces, lots of call to action that we need to now go forward and continue to implement. I feel energized, and I said, boy, with this COVID, I don't know. I said, maybe it's time now for me to really go finish up law school. But coming out of this discussion, I'm really energized. So as we invite you to give and bring your closing remarks, I just want to take some comments from the chat, because we have had a very engaged audience here. Kadeem is saying he agrees, because one of the reasons, right, is underpaid and underrated, right, that undervalued. One time teaching was a very valued profession. They didn't even call you by your name, Principal Malloy. Them call you teacher in Jamaica. That's how my mother, Barbara Dunkley, called her a teacher. She said, Teacher Smith, teacher this. You don't even know the name. They said, teacher live round the road, right? And we need to get back to that reverence. T. Hall says, I remember going to the bank, and she's talking about a teacher, professional, a skills person. I really love it. Ronika Byfield says, very interesting and detailed webinar. Mrs. McDonald said, if we value our people as we should, we would have done differently for them in the past, so that we would have been better prepared as a country to face education in the pandemic. And Ms. McDonald, on that note, hearing these panelists today and knowing that Michael University College is in Jamaica, I know that we are ready for whatever pandemic should come in the future. On that note, panelists, we started with Principal Malloy, and so we are going to end with Principal Malloy and begin with you, Dr. Dice. your closing remarks on the emerging role of the teacher. Global Reset, a part of the international webinar series brought to you by the Practicum unit, Michael University College. Your closing remarks, we must end in 10 minutes. So 2 minutes, we're sticking to this, Dr. Barker. Go ahead, Dr. Dice, followed by Dr. Barker, followed by Principal Malloy. Thank you.
I wish everybody would be energized like you, Dr. Dunkley. Very, very energetic. All right, so there are 2 points that I want to make in my closing here, and it's to do with talking to, funny enough, we're talking in this platform with the Michael University College. And so they probably could start the journey of change from there as a teacher training institution. And then if they bring these teachers out, in the ones who are in training now going out, and they make the change, then this generation will start something different. And we're not telling them to change too much tradition. What we're telling you is to merge the tradition with recent data and recent research, to provide yourselves, as it is, a practical way of moving into the future, as it is, you're a lifelong learner. So let's be practical about being a lifelong learner. And if you're a lifelong learner, then you'll change the mindset of our students. So they're not really getting knowledge from you, but they're developing knowledge with you. And as they develop knowledge with you as a teacher, then they go out and they become producers of knowledge and their own development. And in their systems, they do understand how life works, because many of them are coming from different backgrounds, these students, and they understand how to use things. So if we can help them and become facilitators of their own learning, then they will become more independent, and they will develop those skills such as literacy and numeracy in general. One last point I want to make is being the native of technology. These students, they understand how to use the platforms. So the only caution I would give is to make sure that we just manage the usage of the platform. I wouldn't stop them from using it, but manage it in such a way that they see education coming out of it, and more education and less social media so much. Or if you want to turn the social media content into this social education development, that could work too. So that's my few words to add to everything else that we're saying.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dyson. You stuck to our time quite wonderfully. Dr. Barker, 2 minutes. Thank you so much. Your closing remarks.
All right, thank you. If I don't get the chance to thank you for your seamless moderation of this conversation, just allowing us to explore some important points. So I'll share a little piece and then I'll finish in 2 minutes, don't worry. You know, when I was growing up, there used to be something called the Children's Owens newspaper, right? And that's revealing my age, you know. But they used to have the Children's Own, and there used to be a columnist, the Dear Aunt Susie. Yeah, and in Dear Aunt Susie used to write your little stories, and it always ends with the exact same line. You'd say everything about your life and you'd finish and say, and my ambition is to become something. Yeah, my ambition is to become a lawyer, my ambition is to become a doctor. You do everything and then you finish with that. And the traditional thing as well is when we go to school and we start to talk with students and we build in connection with students day one, we tend to ask them, you know, introduce yourself and then tell me what you're going to become. So when I speak about the mindset that we need to put in, you see, we need to now shift this mindset about my ambition is to become. You know, we just stop asking kids about what they're going to become, and we start to ask them what problems are they going to solve. You see, the world isn't law and doctrine. And Ms. Malloy mentioned the interdisciplinary nature of learning at some in our conversation. And, you know, we're talking about the look into the future, Dr. Dice, yeah? You see, we have to stop asking kids to say, what are they going to become? Because by the time they become it, it's not what it was anymore. They need to start looking at the problems that exist in their society and saying, what problems that I see right now in my country that I am going to solve? And that gives them a real world example of how they can be a part of the future of the country. You see, when we start shifting that kind of the words that we use and the questions that we ask, we're shifting the mindset of everyone within the system. You know, I can go on, but it's these small pieces that we need to tweak within the system. We have the raw materials, you know, but the product is not coming out at the quality of the raw materials that you're putting into it. And the reason is there are people who benefit from the poor quality product. There are systems that are coming from our colonial background that will benefit from that. It pyramids, it starts off with everybody and then a few of us, 2% get on into university. It works for many. It works for many people. But we need to invert that pyramid, and we invert that pyramid by going back to what the role of the teacher was in the first place. You connect with people. When you connect with people, you understand their dreams, their aspirations, and you give them the skills and the tools so that they can achieve it. So my charge to the young teachers who are going out there, you know, the ones who are going off into the world, you know, you're going to learn a lot about education. But the main thing, you know, John Dewey says, you know, he says, you do not learn from experience. We have many teachers in the classroom who have been there for 30 years of experience and have taught exactly how they have taught from the first day they have walked into the classroom. The most important part of your learning is going to be something that every teacher hates. It's when you write your lesson plan and you have to do evaluation 2. Remember evaluation 2? Evaluation 2 was where you reflect on how the lesson went and what you learned from that experience. John Dewey says you do not learn from experience, you learn from reflecting on experience. Mm-hmm. And so we need to prioritize that part. And when we talk to our young teachers and when we ask them what, we don't ask them about whether the kids learn. We want to ask them, what did you learn when you taught that lesson? And when you go into the classroom, if you prioritize your own learning, you will become a better teacher. You will do that professional learning that is being discussed here. You will become a better teacher because you become a student of your students. Yeah, the piece is that we need to stop spending time trying to figure out what we have in our head that we want to put into their head. We need to find out what is in their head so you can put that into your head. Because when you understand what's going on in your student's head, then you will be a better teacher. So when you go off into the world, remember, it's not about you, it's about your students. You're not training to become a mathematics teacher, a science teacher, or an English teacher. You're going to be a teacher of students.
Thank you so much. A teacher of students. Thank you. Principal Malloy, you get the last word. Thank you.
Okay. As the pandemic progressed and as I tried my very best to stay looking like this and, you know, showing up and keeping my student, my everybody connected to Arden, you know, on top of the game. Teacher, Mr. Malcolm, probably sensed one day that I was not quite, you know, the smile never quite connect. And he said to me, Miss, you cannot lead from a place of emptiness. Thank you, Norman Malcolm, for saying that to me. I want to say to you today, all of you going into the profession, take the time out to connect with yourselves. Know who you are. Re-energize, retool. You know, just take care of yourselves. Know what you're liking and what you're not liking. Know when you need to shift, reflect. Miguel, you need to do all of that. What makes you tick? Are you in contact with the other side of you? As a classroom teacher, I did visual arts. I got a good grade too. You know, those are the things that you do at the end of the day. That's what will take you back to your classrooms in a place where you can really do all the things that you need to do. You can connect, you can engage, you can motivate, you can energize. Mm-hmm. And even as you do that affirming of self and, you know, bringing into your space what it is that you need to make you a good teacher who is emotionally stable and present. Do that for your students too. Affirm them. always speak positive outcomes over their lives. I spend time collecting quotes and just filling my mind with these things, because I know when I come onto a platform, whether it is in a case where I'm talking to young teachers, I'm talking to the grade 7 to 13, the staff, the parents, I'm called upon to affirm people, and I take it very seriously. Let's share another anecdote with you. When the pandemic year, when the students were going to do exams, I was on leave and I asked my acting principal, vice principal for permission to do a video and to send to the students to say to them that you got this, you can do it. I sent it and it went out and it happened. This year, as we were coming into the examination period, a student came to me and he said, Miss, the video that you sent out last year, you did the one for this year yet? I didn't know how it went down with the students. But you see, education is not for today. The impact you have is not necessarily for today. I really didn't have the headspace at that point in time to do a video, but I sat down and I wrote as beautiful as I could a letter to say, you can do this. And I had it emailed to all of them. So you can't, and you will never lead, teach, guide everything that you have to do as a teacher, my young people, if you come from a place of emptiness. So fill up yourselves, refill at intervals when it matters. And then after you've done that, do the same for your students. You have to do that. You have to speak possibility into their lives, because sometimes it's only you that will make that difference for them. So make it in yourselves first and then move on and pay it forward. Thank you so much. You're such an awesome host. It's good to see all these people face to face. Thank you so much. It's been for being part of this discussion. You've had me thinking. I've made a lot of notes. So Arden's going to be hearing from me based on what you said today.
Thanks so very much, Principal Malloy. We are indeed, we're full. We have been affirmed today and we are certainly full. Absolutely empowering. We cannot lead from a place of emptiness. On that note, a reminder again to complete the evaluation. Mr. Lawson has it in the chat. You will receive a certificate of participation if you complete the evaluation for 2 or more sessions. I'm now at this time going to invite Mr. Alvin Lawson, who heads the Practicum unit at Michael University College, to say brief closing remarks, followed by Mr. Andre Nelson. For closing remarks, ladies and gentlemen who have joined us on Zoom, if you joined us on social media, we thank you for being here. You have now the call to action. Our cup is full. My heart is full. The capsule is now action and Dr. Barker, reflection. Thank you. Mr. Lawson.
Good evening, everyone.
Mr. Lawson is coming in just with a little bit of technical difficulties. So while he sorts it out, Mr. Nelson, please join us. Thank you.
Dr. Osborne Pinnock, President of the Michael University College, Mr. Rudolph Sewell, Vice President of Administration, Mrs. Joy Baker Gibson, our Dean, and Mr. Alvin Lawson, Practicum Coordinator, our most valued and distinguished invited guests. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my privilege to have been asked to propose a vote of thanks on this occasion. I, on behalf of the Michael University College and the entire team, and my own behalf, extend a very hearty vote of thanks to all speakers for gracing your important work and sharing with us your findings and opinions today. I must mention our deep sense of appreciation for Ms. Nadine Malloy for advising us to look at our relationships and how we connect with people to determine what we understand and, of course, to know who we are. Furthermore, we are grateful to Dr. Dwayne Dice for sharing with us that as teachers, we should talk about what we have and not what we do not have. And instead of giving information only, we should empower our students. I also wish to express my gratitude to Dr. Miguel Barker for giving us an excellent coverage on the concept of prioritizing how students learn and not what they learn. Focus more on how we teach and not what we teach. Now is the time for us to recalibrate. We are all inspired by your great words, of course. I also take the time to thank our moderator for today, Dr. Karen Dunkley, for excellent work in keeping us at the height of our attention and making us all appear at our very best. I also extend my thanks to Mr. Alvin Lawson and the Practicum Unit team for their enormous cooperation in the organization of this event. I cannot thank everyone enough for their involvement and their willingness to take on the completion of these tasks today. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, I want to state that we are all most grateful to all our speakers here today. We thank you for being with us this evening. It has been a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much, Mr. Andre Nelson. Thank you to everyone who joined us, to those who listened, who participated. God bless you. Walk good. Thank you. Mr. Lawson is gone. All right, so we will leave. Thank you so very much. And just really quickly, I think there's a question about the link. When and how do I access the link? The link was in the chat. We're going to ask Mr. Lawson to find a way just to send it out. This was a phenomenal session. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Excellent panelists. The future is sure. Thank you.
Is it finished? Okay.